Hello and welcome back to State of Mind at Home With. My name's Owen Cottrell. I'm one of the trustees of State of Mind Sport, and each week in this series we're speaking to another one of our presenting team from their homes during lockdown. This week it's my pleasure to introduce Phil Veivers. Phil, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, good. Good to see you, Owen. I haven't seen you for a bit. Yeah, it's treating me okay, mate. It's been a long, dragged-out affair, I suppose, but everyone else is in the same boat, and we just got to get on with things.
Absolutely, we do. Absolutely. So, how has it impacted on you and the family, Phil? What's lockdown look like for you?
I suppose the start was pretty tough at the start. My missus come down with a bit of anxiety at the beginning, and sort of had to deal with that at that time, and then I suppose I started to climb into her anxiety a little bit, and I sort of had to get control of that before I could sort of plan everything out. And a lot of that was down to just trying to sort out a routine about what we do on a daily basis with the kids, and obviously my wife, she's a carer, so she's still out there working on the front line. So I got myself into a routine where I just go out with the dog every morning and get the kids into the homeschooling and then do the odd job around the house.
Good stuff. Yep, it's a familiar tale, I think, of lockdown life.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to your rugby league career, Phil, if that's okay. And let's rewind to your younger days. So back in Australia, I believe. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with sport. I believe you're from a very sporting family.
Yeah, I had my father. He represented Queensland playing rugby league, and my brother, he did exactly the same. He represented Queensland and went on to captain Australia playing rugby league. Then my cousin, he played for Australia. My sister married into a rugby family, married Wayne Bennett, and he went on to be the player for Australia and obviously the coach that he is today. And I also had a cousin who played cricket for Australia in Tom. So yeah, I suppose it was always going to be that I was going to go down the sporting route. I suppose started at a pretty young age playing soccer or football, whichever one you want to call it, for about 4 or 5 years, and then got involved in rugby league and started playing that to the point where I think my mum had enough of watching rugby league with Dad and Greg and then obviously myself. But she put a ban on me playing it and made me go and take up golf and tennis. So she wanted to give me a little bit of a taster on other sports as well. Then I went on to play rugby union at school, rugby union, cricket, basketball. Then ended up going back after playing for the Queensland schoolboys. I ended up going back playing rugby league.
I suppose looking back on it, that was probably no bad thing that you tried your hand at a number of different sports.
Yeah, no, it was good. You pick up something from each and every sport that's completely different. Obviously, rugby league is very team orientated. So golf is pretty singular, and tennis is as well. So, I got something out of all of them.
Where did your rugby league playing career then take you then, Phil, in terms of who you were playing for over in Australia and ultimately what brought you over to these shores?
I was in the police academy at the time, so I was playing for the police academy, and then after leaving the police, I went and started playing for a club in Brisbane called Souths. Did 2 years there, and then I came over to St Helens as such, which I wasn't originally playing on their shopping list. They came out to sign Mal Meninga and Gary Belcher. Gary Belcher decided he only wanted to go for 6 months, and they wanted him to go for 12. So I just put my hand up and said, "Well, I'll go for 12." And I ended up at St Helens in 1984.
So what was that like thinking back? You obviously up sticks and moved halfway around the world to the UK. What was that transition like for you?
Oh, it was different. I'd never ever had left Australia before. So my first trip out of Australia was to England, and I suppose it was a good job that I was travelling across with Mal and his wife. They sort of kept me under. Well, they didn't keep me under their thumb as such. Mal got me absolutely blind drunk on the journey over. I know that. So, but once I got here, the people of St Helens were really friendly towards me, and took me under their wing and really looked after me. To be fair, it was a good time to play for them, yeah, certainly. But it was also a bad time to play for them in the sense that Wigan had all-conquering team there of full-time professionals, and had some great players at that club, and we tended to come up against them a hell of a lot during the time that I was there. But yeah, over a 12-year period at Saints, we had a pretty successful campaign. We went to Wembley 3 times, well, 4 times whilst I was there, losing 3 and winning 1. We won 2 grand finals, one at Old Trafford, one at Ellen Road, and the John Player Trophy over at Central Park. We won a couple of Lancashire Cups as well. So it was a pretty successful campaign for me whilst I was over here and whilst I was at St Helens. And I met some great players, and I'm still friends with a lot of them now.
Who were some of the standout players that you either played alongside at that time, Phil, or perhaps lined up against?
Well, as I said about Wigan, you can't go far past Ellery Hanley. He was a pretty special type of player. He had everything, very, very gifted. But in that era and that time, you had Ellery, you had Sean Edwards and Andy Gregory, and you could go up to Leeds with Lee Crooks playing up there. Had all the Kiwi boys that came over at Hull: Gary Campbell, Dana Hara, James Lilloy. But everyone was sort of investing in overseas players at that time, and there was plenty of internationals that came across. Warrington invested; they ended up with Les Boyd and a few Kiwi boys that came over. Kevin Tamati being one there. So there's some really tough kids there, and Saints were no different. They ended up with Paul Vorton coming over, and we had a few duck eggs that come across as well along the way. So that didn't really didn't perform to their best abilities, shall I say. They sort of came for a holiday. And I don't think you can go too far past Mal Meninga. He's a pretty special type of player. One of the most naturally gifted athletes that I had the pleasure to play with.
You obviously never left the UK after coming over. What, apart from the sport, what else was it about this place that's kept you here so long?
I got married whilst I was at St Helens, and I had a couple of children. And in '96, when I left Saints and moved over to I didn't move to Huddersfield. I transferred across there to play at Huddersfield. I was just travelling up there. I went through a divorce with my wife, so I didn't really want to sit on the other side of the world and see my kids grow up from over there. So I decided then that I'd hang around and stay here and watch them grow up. So that was the reasoning behind it. But in the meantime, I got remarried and had another 2 young children. So I had 4 kids. So that's what really kept me here, really.
So there really is no leaving now.
No. English passport now.
You got an international cap as well, did you not?
I did. Yeah, I did. I played for Scotland. Everyone keeps asking me how there. Yeah, I always tell them it's because I had a haggis, but it's not really. My grandfather was 3 when he emigrated to Australia, so I basically got picked for Scotland on the basis of grandpatriality as such. So, yeah, I had an international against France up in Scotland.
Tell us about that day. What was that like to represent Scotland?
It was funny. Before I went up there, the week leading up to, I'd sort of been in the local club where I'd go and play snooker. And I told them all that the game was on the weekend and that we're going to have to sing a Flower of Scotland. And so by the time we got up there and singing the national anthem of Flower of Scotland, I had all them in hysterics in the snooker club. And but it was good. There was a few more Aussie boys that were playing in the side, and there was a few Scottish. I think John Duffy was a young 18-year-old then. He was my halfback. I was playing standoff. So, but we got dudded. We got dudded in the last 5 minutes with a poor call off a referee. But a guy called Thierry Henry. So not Thierry Henry, Thierry Alaba. Sorry. So,
I was
going to say he'd be a good bloke, wouldn't he? Anyway, we got dudded and we lost by 2 points, but the experience was pretty special. The lead up to the week was, I shudder when I think about it, really, because we only had sort of 2 days up there in Scotland, and we're going into an international, and the coach at the time said, "Oh, just go out and enjoy a couple of drinks 2 nights before." I'm like, why? But anyway, we did. And it was a good week up there. I ended up staying a few days afterwards as well.
Good stuff. So, in terms of your playing career, you didn't finish up at Huddersfield, did you? You had one more club after that. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I sort of played at Huddersfield. In '98, I was asked to go on the coaching staff, and then they asked me to take over as caretaker coach. So, in the middle of '98, I ended up I stopped playing, and then I got to 2000 when I left Huddersfield, and I was playing rugby union at the time, and one of my mates was playing for Swinton, Paul Lachlan. He was playing for them, and I just said to him, I said, does the coach over there, does he want an assistant coach? At the time, the coach was Mike Gregory, and the message come back said, well, I don't want an assistant coach, but I could do with a 13 for the rest of the season. So I went over to Swinton. I was playing rugby union on the Saturday and rugby league on the Sunday.
How was that?
It was okay. It was okay. I didn't get tackled in rugby union. I think I only had to make 6 tackles, so I was fly half anyway. So it was either pass the ball or kick it. So make half a dozen tackles. So the Saturday game wasn't too bad. The Sunday was a little bit more physical.
So it sounds like by the time you went to Swinton, you were already making your first steps into the world of coaching. Tell us about that. How did that sort of then go on to materialise?
Well, once I'd finished that season with Swinton, Mike Gregory then moved over to Wigan as a coach over there. Tony Barrow Senior was the CEO over at Swinton, and I just asked if he wanted me to take up the coaching, which he said no at the time. And then he said because at the time he wanted someone to do commercial management as well. I wasn't really into that, but halfway through the year, they weren't going too good, and Tony gave us a ring and he just said, listen, he said, will you come and take over to the end of the year? So I took over at Swinton then for the in 2002, that was, I think. Yeah, it was 2002. Took over for the rest of the season, and we knocked off quite a number of good results. And at the end of that year, I signed to go over to Leigh as an assistant coach there. Probably only did 2 training sessions there. And I was delivering courses with a company called Fit UK. Well, at the time it wasn't Fit UK; it was a different name. Central Sports was at the time, but I was delivering courses for them. And I just happened to be delivering to the apprentices at Bradford, and Brian Noble was the coach at the time. He just came out one day and asked if I wanted to be one of his assistants, which didn't take me too long to get rid of a couple of jobs. And sort of met him on the Thursday night. We went and had a drink, and he said, well, I need an answer by tomorrow. I said, well, you've got your answer now. Is yes, but I just need to get rid of 2 jobs, which I got rid of one on the way home on the phone, and the next one I had a board meeting on the Friday, and I was told I couldn't leave, but I just walked out because not too many opportunities like that come about. So, and I needed to take up that role over at Bradford, and that's how I then got into the Super League.
So, in terms of that transition from player to coach, what was that like? And we'll throw a question in that came in on Twitter as well from Phil Cooper. He asked, what's the best message you can give to players when you're coaching them?
I'm a big one on honesty. I think that works throughout the organisation. I think I look back to when I was in my playing days, and if I wasn't selected for a game on the weekend, I'd always go to the coach and I'd ask why. And I had too many coaches that weren't straight up enough to give you the straight answer. So there was no real honesty there. So I always said that if I got into the coaching side of things, that if I had to make some tough decisions and I had to speak to players, and it was always that you needed to be honest with them and just tell them straight as to why they're not in the side. And I like that through the organisation, because as a player, you need to be honest to your teammates. Because if you're not honest to your teammates, whether that be on the training ground or whether that be on the game day park, then you're not going to work as a team, and you're not going to get the result that you want at the end of the game. So that's the big thing that I instill into people, is that you really do need to be honest with each other and yourself.
So tell us about your days at Bradford then, working alongside Noble, and did you love the coaching life, and did it always mean that you wanted to go on and be a coach yourself?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it when I was at Huddersfield, but once I'd sort of had a dabble at it. And don't get me wrong, it was going in blind when I went into the coaching. And you tend to go in to do an apprenticeship and work under a couple of different coaches before you want to take up your own role as such. But I went there with Brian, and I went in there the first year I was there. I was the attack coach, and one of the things that he wanted from his coaches was that every year you sort of tended to change your roles. So the first year I was there, I was the under 23 coach, under 21 coach, and the attack coach. And then the second year I was there, I was the under 18s coach, and I was the defence coach for the first team. So your roles tend to change. So you tend to pick up on everything along the way. So it's sort of making you more of a rounded coach. But I enjoyed my time at Bradford. It probably makes it easier when you're with a successful bunch of athletes who just keep knocking off the results and picking up silverware. And we had a really good run there for 3.5 years where we won a lot of trophies. 2 grand finals at Old Trafford, and Challenge Cup, and also 2 World Club Championships. And I don't think you can get much better than that in a 3.5 year period.
Tell us where you went after Bradford, Phil. Where did your coaching career take you next?
From there, Nobby went across to Wigan, and I was just, his wife used to work at Bradford, so I was still at Bradford, and I just walked into the club shop one day and just having a chat with Barbara, and Barbara says, you could do with some assistance over there, and then I got a phone call from Nobby saying, do you want to come across here and work over here? And it just seemed to make sense for me because I was still living in Wigan. And I was travelling across to Bradford every day, so it just made sense for me to be just down the road, 7 minutes down the road from the training ground. And my wife was pregnant with my second wife was pregnant with her first child, so it just made sense that I could be in and around her as well as being just down the road from training. So I went across to Wigan, and I spent another 3.5 years there at Wigan. Not as successful not as successful, but successful in other ways. I think the first year we're there, we're fighting off relegation, which we did do. Which I thought was a massive achievement for the club for where they were when I arrived. As a group, we turned that around, and then we had an influx of some high profile players come in, and a lot of expectation as to where and what we should be doing, and we just kept getting to the semi-finals and just getting knocked over. And I think it had got to the stage then where the owner of the club at the time just realised that probably a new voice needed to come in and to take us that next step, or to take Wigan that next step to winning some silverware. And we parted company, and the following year they picked up their silverware then. So after 3.5 years of being the nilly man and getting knocked over in the semis, they eventually got on to win.
What is that like, Phil, when you depart a role in a club, only then for in fairly short order them to go on and pick up silverware? Is it something that you sort of ruminate over and reflect on a lot?
No, because I'm a great believer that it doesn't just happen overnight. There's a lot of seeds that have got to be planted first before you can grow that orchard. And over that 3.5 year period, there was a lot of seeds sown of some decent culture being put in, and a lot of different things, techniques and way that we play the game, and they were all put in as we go along. And for someone else to come in and just implement a couple of other things on top of that, and just to take it over the line, at some stage you do feel part of that journey. Just that you don't pick up your medal or the accolades for that achievement. So it didn't irk me at the time. But at that stage, it was with just having another couple of young kids. That affected me more so than anything else. I was out of the game for quite a while, to be fair. And that, like I said, I was having to find a job which I hadn't had to do for a number of years, and it was a bit of, as I said, it was a bit of a roller coaster trying to do that. And I think I ended up in 2010. I went to Salford in 2011. It was about 18 months later when I picked up a job there.
How was that sort of being out of the game for a period, having been in it for so long?
No, I wasn't good. I wasn't in a good place at that time. I had a run with depression coming off the back of that. To be fair, and I don't think it was just because I was out of the game or I was away from it. I just the way that I finished there was that with the owner calling me in his office to move me on, impacted upon me because in my eyes, I just felt like that I failed my kids there. So, I did. I struggled for a good while with my mental health along the way there, and I didn't do anything about it because I didn't know exactly what it was at the time, and dealt with it myself. Did the typical bloke thing, didn't go and ask for help and all that. And, but once I got back coaching again, it had disappeared. So, further down the line when I went to Salford, I didn't. It wasn't there anymore. It disappeared just as fast as it comes. So I went back coaching then at Salford. So starting as an assistant and quickly moved into the head coach's role there.
So when you look back on that spell now, do you see things that were happening kind of with the benefit of hindsight that you might now recognise in terms of things, triggers or things that tell you that you're perhaps starting to struggle with depression?
Yeah, I can look back and see the mannerisms that I was showing to my wife and to the kids and to friends too, I suppose. I just tried to. I was brilliant at putting masks up. That was not the good thing, but I mean, I was good at it. I was good at putting masks up, and not a lot of people could see through the mask. My wife was pretty clever; she could see through it. There was just little things around the house that when I was in a good place I wouldn't do, and when I was in a bad place I would do. And though there's little triggers along the way, I just feel it getting worse and worse and worse. So. But then again, I didn't put any routine or anything in place then. It's only sort of further down the line that I sort of realised what I wasn't doing. And that was probably after the Salford when it hit me really bad.
So yeah, tell us a bit about your time with Salford. In fact, we had a question in on this from Chris Young on Twitter, and he said, "How difficult was it coaching Salford in those years, sort of 2011 to 2013, wasn't it? Did you enjoy the challenge?" He also said, for his part, you had them playing some lovely stuff, and he didn't think that you deserved what ultimately did happen to you. But yeah, tell us about that time.
Yeah, nice comment. Well, I arrived as an assistant. There was myself and there was Malcolm Alker, and Sean McRae was the coach at the time. And then Sean went off with depression, and myself and Malcolm took over. And then Malcolm had left the club as well, and I was just there by myself. There was me, a conditioner, and his assistant, and a physio. So I think that was the common denominator all the while whilst I was there, is that we were always understaffed. We'd always, wherever I was before, there always tended to be 2 assistant coaches, there always tended to be 2 physios, there always tended to be 2 strength and conditioning coaches, along the way. So that, there was a number of bodies there that could, you could share some workload out there, and you'd get more isolation on the player where you could give them a lot more time. But then all of a sudden, when you're there and there's just one coach, and you're in Super League, that's really tough. Because the year after, I brought Sean Long in. Well, actually, Matt Parrish came then. He came in. So after I was a caretaker, Matt Parrish came in as a head coach, and didn't even see out pre-season training before he went back to Australia. And then the coach there, the owner at the time, John Wilkinson, gave me the job as head coach. But I also had Sean Long as my assistant. And Long was a genius with the attack. And I would have been mad if I didn't sort of pick his brains and get some ideas on about how we could play. And the reality of everything, if I didn't agree with what I saw on the training ground, then we wouldn't have played that style of footy. But we played some pretty good stuff there. And 212, we had a pretty good year. 212, maybe punched above our weight with the players we had, but I thought we had a pretty good year. But I really enjoyed my time there. I really did. John Wilkinson was a fabulous bloke, a great chairman of the club. Done so much for Salford. It was just a shame that At that stage, he just didn't have the finances to carry on with the club. John had called a meeting and told me that he needed to sell the club and that he'd run out of money to be able to keep the club going the way it was, and that he needed a buyer. And a guy called Marlon Kukash came in and bought the club, and he gave me the job for 4 games. We had a pretty small roster at the time as well, and we sort of lost some of our better players. I think before the end of the season, Matty Smith was sold to Wigan and Joel Moon to Leeds. So a lot of the quality players, a couple other players were going back to Australia. So a lot of the quality players are leaving, and we just had a real skeleton of a team to go into that next year. And it was always going to be a struggle that year, that first year, because of that. And 4 games in, Marwan decided to part company with myself. That's how I finished at Salford.
Knowing you and your backstory through your work with State of Mind, I know that then hit you hard, didn't it?
We'd done a fair job in 2012, and sort of trying to keep the nucleus or a skeleton of the side ready to go into that following year. I think I had done a pretty good job of that, and even though I could see that there needed to be a long-term structure put in place for Salford to gain success. I could see from a couple of meetings with Marwan that I wasn't going to get that long term, because he wanted success there and now. That first year, my first meeting at his house was, I want to make the top 8 and I want to win the Challenge Cup. So does every owner. But there's a lot of clubs out there that had a heavier roster than what we had, and a lot more quality. So that was the frustrating thing about it all, is that there needed to be that plan, and I would have probably enjoyed if I was given that chance to put that plan in place, but it never happened, and I was moved on, and it did impact upon me badly. Again, I think like the Wigan scenario, it was more about all of a sudden just thinking that I was a complete failure about what I was trying to achieve, and it impacted upon me. It impacted upon my family, and again, as I said, I got 4 kids, and to feel that you'd let them down and that you'd failed them really played havoc with my mind, and I did. I went back into depression really badly back then with mental health.
Did you recognise it sooner this time round, and therefore were you able to do things to help yourself at that time?
No, because I think I was getting angry, and the more angry I got, the less that I wanted to talk to people. I just become pretty introverted, and I was very, very snappy around my missus and my kids, and I just didn't want to do a lot of things. I didn't. Some days I wouldn't even get out of bed. Other days I'd just sit on the couch, watch telly. So I think probably one of the better things that happened out of the whole thing was that my wife had obviously seen a lot of things, and she used to go to work, and she'd ring me 6, 7, 8 times a day during that, and it used to annoy the hell out of me, her ringing me. And but looking back now, I can see why she was doing that. She'd just check it in, see if what I was doing, and seeing if things had got worse, I suppose, which eventually they did.
In terms of your work with us, Phil, with State of Mind, when did we come onto your radar, and what was it that made you want to get involved with the charity?
Dr. Phil Cooper got me involved. He asked me to do a talk at UCLan University in 2013 on the stresses of moving country. How much stress I went through from moving country at a young age. So I did a talk at UCLan in 2013, and it was only sort of further down the line that he realised that he'd opened a can of worms, I think, with me. That I had a lot in my background of how I'd struggled with my own mental health, and it was more as I was working with you guys that it sort of hit my mental health. I had a dip in that at one point, and then I also lost my nephew to suicide. So, and that impacted upon me again. So I became pretty passionate about mental health then, and I became passionate about trying to go out and speak to people and just get positive mental health messages across to them, and loving every minute of it.
What is it that you personally get from it? I've obviously spoken to a lot of you guys on the presenting roster over this series, and I think everyone gets something slightly different out of it. But what do you love about standing up and delivering the sessions that you do?
I just love standing up in front of people to get our messages across, and just to prove to the public that it is normal that people do suffer with their mental health, and you can't just look at someone and think, oh, they're fine. Anyone can suffer with it. And when you have people coming up in from the audience afterwards and saying, I had no idea that you were struggling. I had teammates, I had ex-teammates that have been in the audience, and they've come up and said, I had no idea that you're struggling. I had no idea. And that's the point that I'm trying to get across to people, is that you don't have any idea sometimes, and that it is normal, and just trying to normalize things that, it doesn't matter who you are or what race you are or what standing you are in society and how much money you might earn. You could be a millionaire, you might, be on the breadline, and it can affect anyone. And that's the whole point, is just trying to say, hey, listen, do something about it. Check in on yourself, check in on your friends. Make sure that you're okay first before you're looking out for anyone else.
Good stuff. Yeah, amazing. So obviously we're missing, I think we're all missing the face-to-face work that State of Mind's renowned for at the moment. What are you missing most? How are you sort of remaining engaged with the charity and with your sort of colleagues, I guess, during this time?
The doc, he gives me a ring every now and then, just checks in, seeing how things are. And I've touched base with Nick a couple of times, and I'm in contact with Scully all the time. We tend to ring up every odd day, probably every day, just checking in on each other, making sure everything's okay. I think I just got to remember next time that he rings up and say, let's go for a walk, I need to check what distance we're going to do. The last time he rang up, we ended up doing a half marathon. So it was very good, until I came back with two blisters on my heel and a bit of chafing. So, but no, that's me. I get up in the morning, walk my dog. I normally take him out now for 2.5 hours. I don't know how he's going to have, whether he's going to have any paws left at the end of this lockdown, but I was supposed to go yesterday. We're supposed to go and do another walk down the canal, and he pulled up lame with a sore toe. So Daniel couldn't walk, so I turned around and took the dog out again. So, but that's how I'm keeping in contact. So majority of the time, most of my conversations are with Danny.
Nice. Yeah, I know you and Danny are particularly tight. He submitted a question, as you might have seen on Twitter, actually, Phil. Have you ever eaten rabbit?
Yeah. The answer to it is no, but there is a story behind that, because when I first came over from Australia, they billeted me out, and I was living with a lady called an old duck called Mrs. Fraser, lovely old lady, and she had another billet there with her, and she used to cook the meals for us on average. She said, "Oh, have you ever had rabbit?" And I said, "Well, no, I've never tasted it." So she says, "I'll tell you what, I'll do that for your tea." I said, "Okay." So I went out to training, and that night, and I came back, and she said, "I'll go and get your tea now." And I sat at the table, and she came back, and she put the plate down on the table, and sure enough, it was a rabbit. It was the whole rabbit. I could see that it was a rabbit. I couldn't eat it. I just had to hand it back and say, "Sorry, lady. Sorry, Mrs. Fraser, I can't eat that. It's a rabbit. The only thing that's missing is its tail and ears." No, so that's where he's getting that from.
Nasty. Okie doke, cool. I'll finish up with this one. Alan Johnson asked, if you were stuck in a lift, Phil, with a State of Mind colleague, who would you want it to be and why?
I'll tell you, it wouldn't be Sculthorpe. I'd be frightened that he'd be trying to take a video or a photo of me eating.
Yeah, he submitted some photos actually for the edit of this.
I'm sure he would. I'm sure he would. He normally sends them on kids rugby group that we're in, WhatsApp group. I can't do anything without a photo coming out.
Yeah.
See, Dr. Phil Cooper's all good too because he's just so easy to talk to. But Malcolm, I'll go with Malcolm.
Nice.
Malcolm's all good. I used to have lots of great conversations with Malcolm. He was always picking my brains about different things with the coaching side of things, and obviously being a Wigan supporter and me being a coach at Wigan for 3.5 years, he was dead set picking a lot of things out of my brain from those 3.5 years. So yeah, I'll go with Malcolm. Go with Mr. Ray.
The godfather of State of Mind.
The godfather, yeah, definitely.
All right, Phil, listen, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. And
no worries, Owen. Cheers, mate.
No worries. And yes, hopefully we'll be together soon in the same rooms and enjoy the rest of lockdown, if that's the right thing to say.
Can't change it. You got to enjoy it.
Absolutely. All right, mate.
Okay, mate. Cheers, mate. Ta.